Welcome to the fourth episode of our podcast.
Couple of lawyers, arguments and thought.
And essentially, it's all about a set of guidelines called the Guidelines for Prevention and Regulation of Dark Patterns 2023, which were actually notified about a year ago.
Okay.
And this podcast episode is sort of celebrating the one-year anniversary of these guidelines. And so we're going to be looking at, what they are and, what they have to say about them.
Okay, well, let's jump in.
Yeah. Okay, so let's break this down a little bit. For those who are new to this, what exactly are dark patterns?
Well, in a nutshell, they're these sneaky design tricks that are used in websites, apps, you name it, to steer users towards actions that benefit the company.
Yeah.
Often at the expense of the user.
So like those annoying pop-ups that make it like practically impossible to refuse cookies?
Exactly.
That's like a classic example.
That's a classic one. Or think about those times when you're shopping online.
Yeah.
And you see a message that says like only 2 left.
Oh, yeah.
Flashing next to the product you're looking at. That feeling of urgency is often completely manufactured.
Yeah.
Just to pressure you into buying something you might not even need.
Ugh. I totally fall for that one.
Yeah.
So how are India's guidelines addressing these kinds of tactics?
Well, they start by clearly defining what constitutes a dark pattern.
Okay.
And then they give specific examples that are now prohibited.
Yeah.
And they've also created this regulatory body called the Central Consumer Protection Authority, CCPA for short, that has the power to actually enforce these rules and hold companies accountable.
Okay, the CCPA, that sounds pretty serious.
Yeah.
Like a watchdog.
They're there to protect consumers.
Can you tell us more about these specified dark patterns that the guidelines call out?
Yeah, some of the most common ones that you'll come across are false urgency, which we just talked about, and confirm shaming.
Okay.
That's where they make you feel bad for opting out of something.
Oh, like when you try to unsubscribe from an email list?
Yes.
And they're like, are you sure you want to miss out on all these exclusive deals and updates?
Exactly.
Yeah, you're like, I guess not.
It makes you second guess yourself, even though you know you don't need another email clogging up your inbox.
Yeah.
It happens to the best of us.
I've totally fallen for that.
Another common one is the dreaded subscription trap.
Ugh.
It's super easy to sign up for something,
Yes.
but then incredibly difficult to cancel.
Oh my gosh, don't even get me started.
You know the feeling.
It's like they make you jump through hoops.
Exactly.
Just to get out of it.
And I'm glad to hear that the guidelines aim to make canceling a service
Yeah.
just as easy as signing up.
That's good.
What else is on their hit list? They also address things like disguised advertisements,
Okay.
which are cleverly designed to blend in with regular content, so you don't even realize you're being advertised to.
Oh, that's so sneaky.
And another one is sneak into basket, where they add extra items to your online shopping cart
Ugh.
without your explicit consent.
It's amazing how much of this we encounter online without even realizing it.
Yeah, it is.
It makes you wonder how many times you've been manipulated by these tactics.
That's the thing about dark patterns.
Yeah.
They often work on a subconscious level. But now that you know what to look for,
Yeah.
you'll start to spot them everywhere.
So let's talk about some more of those specific examples.
Okay.
I'm really curious how these things actually play out in the real world.
Okay, well, imagine you're filling out a form online, and you notice some options are already pre-selected for you.
Oh, yeah.
That's a dark pattern called pre-selected consent.
Okay.
They're trying to get you to agree to things you might not want
Ugh.
without you even realizing it.
That's so frustrating. I feel like I've definitely fallen for that before.
Yeah.
What about like hidden costs?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure we've all experienced that at some point.
Absolutely.
Like when they tack on extra fees or charges at the very last minute,
Yeah.
like during checkout.
Yeah, by that point, you've already invested the time and the effort, so you're more likely to just accept the charges,
Yeah.
even if you're annoyed.
Right.
And that's why the guidelines specifically prohibit these types of practices.
Yeah.
They're designed to protect consumers and ensure they have genuine choice and control over their online experiences.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What about interface interference?
Yeah.
I've definitely seen that one,
Okay.
but I'm not sure I fully understand it.
Think about those cookie banners where the accept button is big and bright.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
the reject button is tiny and hidden.
Yeah.
Maybe in a drop-down menu or something.
Right.
They're deliberately making it harder for you to refuse cookies.
Ah, so that's what's going on.
Yeah, they're manipulating the design to nudge you in a specific direction.
So are these guidelines just for online shopping?
No.
Or do they apply to other online services too?
They have a pretty broad scope.
Okay.
They apply to any digital platform that's systematically offering goods or services in India,
Okay.
which means they cover everything from e-commerce sites to social media platforms
Wow.
to streaming services.
So it's not just about buying stuff online.
Right.
It affects pretty much every corner of the internet.
Exactly. And India isn't alone in this. Other countries are taking similar steps to combat dark patterns.
This is where it gets really interesting. I was reading that the EU's Digital Services Act also tackles dark patterns.
That's right.
And the U.S. just hit Epic Games,
Yeah.
the makers of Fortnite,
Oh, wow.
with a massive fine for using these tactics.
Yeah, they were fined $245 million
Wow.
for using deceptive design to trick users.
Wow.
Especially kids to making in-app purchases.
That's huge.
Yeah, it sends a pretty clear message
Yeah.
that regulators are starting to take this issue seriously.
So in India, the CCPA has the power to impose similar penalties, right?
Absolutely. They can issue fines,
Okay.
cease and desist orders, and even suspend services
Wow.
if a company keeps breaking the rules.
So they have real teeth.
They do.
This CCPA isn't messing around.
Not at all.
They're making it clear that companies need to prioritize user well-being
Yes.
and design their products in a way that respects consumer choice.
Exactly.
This is all starting to make a lot more sense now. But I'm still curious, how effective have these guidelines actually been in India?
Right.
Have we seen any real changes?
It's still relatively early days,
Oh.
but there are definitely signs of progress.
Like what?
We're seeing companies tweaking their interfaces,
Yeah.
especially in areas like cookie consent, and making subscription cancellations easier.
Okay.
And the CCPA has been actively investigating complaints
Yeah.
and issuing warnings to companies that aren't playing by the rules.
So it sounds like these guidelines are already having a real impact,
Yes.
even if it's still early days.
I think as consumers become more aware of dark patterns
Yeah.
and start demanding better, we'll see even more progress in the future.
That's encouraging. Okay, before we move on, let's just quickly recap the key points
Okay.
about India's approach to tackling these dark patterns.
So India has introduced these comprehensive guidelines that clearly define what dark patterns are
Right.
and prohibit a whole bunch of manipulative tactics.
Mm-hmm.
They've also set up a dedicated watchdog, the CCPA,
Yeah.
with real power to enforce these rules and hold companies accountable.
And they're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk.
Right.
They can issue fines, shut down operations, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah,
This is a major step forward in protecting Indian consumers online.
absolutely. Yeah, it's really setting a precedent for other countries
Okay.
and showing that consumer protection in the digital age is a top priority.
So this is all great information, but I'm sure our listeners wondering, what does this all mean for me?
Right.
Like, how can I protect myself from falling into these dark pattern traps?
Well, the first line of defense is awareness.
Okay.
Now that you know what dark patterns are and how they work, you'll be much better equipped to spot them.
Okay, so knowledge is power.
Exactly. The more you know, the less likely you are to be manipulated.
Right.
And don't be afraid to question things.
Yeah.
If a website or app is making you feel pressured or tricked, take a step back and ask yourself, is this design really in my best interest?
That's great advice.
Hmm.
We need to be more mindful about our online interactions.
Yeah.
It's so easy to just get caught up in the moment and click whatever button is easiest.
Right.
But we need to be more aware of the tactics that companies are using to influence our choices.
I couldn't agree more. And remember, you always have the right to say no.
Yeah.
If you don't want to accept cookies or sign up for a newsletter,
Yeah.
you don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let those sneaky designs pressure you into doing something that you'll regret later.
Right. And if you think a company's using dark patterns, you can report them to the authorities, right?
Absolutely. In India, you can file a complaint with the CCPA.
Okay.
They have a website and a helpline where you can report any suspicious activity.
Okay. So don't hesitate to speak up
Yes.
and hold these companies accountable.
Exactly.
But before we wrap things up, I have one final thought-provoking question for our listener. Okay, so if companies are resorting to these manipulative tactics to get us to do what they want,
Right.
what does that say about their values?
That's a really important question,
Yeah.
and one that we should all be asking ourselves as consumers.
Mm-hmm.
I think it speaks to a larger issue of ethics in the digital age.
Okay.
You know, as technology becomes more sophisticated
Right.
and our lives become increasingly intertwined with the online world,
Yeah,
it's crucial for companies to be transparent and accountable for their actions.
absolutely. We need to demand better from the companies we interact with online.
Yes.
We deserve to be treated with respect, not manipulated into making choices that benefit them at our expense.
Couldn't agree more. And the fact that we're having this conversation
Yeah.
and that governments are starting to take action against dark patterns
Hmm.
is a sign that things are moving in the right direction.
It's
Yes.
definitely a step in the right direction, but it's also up to each of us to be vigilant and informed.
Yeah,
We can't rely solely on regulations and enforcement.
right.
We need to take an active role in protecting ourselves from these manipulative tactics.
I'm so glad you brought this topic to our attention.
Oh, well, thank you for lending your expertise to this deep dive.
Of course.
You've given our listeners some really valuable insights
Good.
and tools to navigate the online world more safely.
It was my pleasure. I'm always happy to talk about ethical design
Yeah.
and consumer protection.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into dark patterns.
Yes.
We hope you found it informative and empowering.
Mm.
Remember, knowledge is power. And by understanding these tactics,
Yes.
you can make more informed choices about how you interact with the online world.
And if you've ever encountered a dark pattern that really got under your skin,
Oh, yeah.
we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah.
Share your experiences in the comments, and let's keep this conversation going.
And speaking of staying informed, next time we're going to be diving into something completely different. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast and turn on notifications so you don't miss it.
Yes, and until then, stay vigilant out there in the digital world.
Yeah.
And remember, you have the power to make informed choices. Don't let those dark patterns get the best of you.
Thanks again for joining us on this deep dive into dark patterns.
Of course.
We'll catch you next time. Stay curious.